Okay, well, it is 10:30, so I want to go ahead and respect your time, and then we'll kind of get ready to get started. Um, the title of this session is up here on the screen. It's A Gracious Plan for Professional Growth. My name is Eric Evans. I am the mentor and coach for FTC 11242 and 12645. 11242 launched last year. 12645 is a first-year rookie team. We are based here in Texas, up in a small community. It's about 30 minutes south of Dallas. For us, I joke that rush hour is when the local ranchers' cows get out. We rush around and try to gather them up. So I forgot why I left the city until this morning when I was driving in at 3 o'clock in the morning and hit the north side of Houston at about 7, and it took me another hour to get from the north side of Houston into downtown. And then I remembered that's why I left Dallas. So anyway, in addition to being the coach for 242 and 645, I'm also the league coordinator for the, actually we wound up being the only league out of North Texas this year, the El Dorado League. Everybody else up in the North Texas area chose to play qualifiers, except 15 teams. So I was the coordinator for that league. And today what I'm going to be presenting was a plan that I had developed from, we started this last year. It worked very well for me, and it's something that I wanted to share with y'all. I've shared it with the other teams within our league that we had, excuse me, within our league that we had last year. I've also shared this with the league coaches that we had this year, and it's been something that's actually been very successful for all of us. Just so I can kind of get an idea from the room, how many of you are currently teachers in addition to coaching? Okay, how many of you that are teachers know the word growth plan at all? Okay, does it usually not have a great connotation with it? Yeah, okay. For those that do not come from an education background, a growth plan is not something that usually has a real friendly feeling to it within education. But that's what I call these that I'm going to be talking about. However, I make it very clear to everybody that these are not the way that we look at them as far as teachers. When I went to my principal, discussed this with him last year, at first he kind of chuckled when I explained to him, this is what I want to do. We had a small situation, and you're going to see actually the example of this growth plan that we did, where some of my students were not being, best way to put it, graciously professional with each other. And I brought the team in. We had revisited what the expectations were, and unfortunately there was one young man, it was not entirely sinking in. My principal at that point basically told me, well, then take him off the team. And I told him, well, I'm not ready to move to that quite yet. So that's when I developed this idea of a growth plan. And as I said, you're going to get to see that. You're also going to get to see, though, how we use this in the off season. So it actually serves two different purposes. When we come up with this plan, I do share this quote with my students from Ben Franklin of, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. We actually discussed this one very early on in the season with our engineering notebook. It's actually at the front cover of both of my team's engineering notebooks that we have to plan. We have to document. We need detailed plan. Otherwise, it is not going to succeed. So that's kind of one of the driving forces that we have here. Just to kind of give you an idea as to the students that I initially unleashed this plan on. For my teams, as I said, we are here in Texas. The community that I'm from, we are about 83% economically disadvantaged, so translation, 83% live in poverty. So we are a high poverty district. Average here in Texas is 59%, so we're a little bit, I guess, less well off than the rest of the state would be concerned. English language learners, I've got a fourth of my students, English is not their native language. Texas average is 18%, so I've got a little bit of a economic barrier. We have a language barrier, and then this one actually wound up being a cultural barrier. It was a little bit interesting. I'll talk about it here in a minute. My district and my teams match this pretty much exactly. We're about 70% Hispanic, whereas the state average is 52%. So I've gotten to learn a lot about Hispanic culture. For me, now as I said, this same plan we've been able to use in districts that are very affluent, that may have an ELL, so an English language learner population that's less than 1%, and have a complete diverse mix of students. And this plan I've seen it be successful in districts and teams that are just like that as well. Okay, so as I said, when we have this, with this growth plan, it does actually serve two different purposes. Kind of depends on what time of the year we're in. One of them is during the competition season. And that's when I use it to address different concerns. And I'll show you that here, I think it's on the next slide. As to, usually it's going to be when an issue arises with a team member that has already been addressed by either myself, it's been addressed by the other coach, or it's been addressed by one of the student coaches. Then we also have, for off-season, we actually, I push my students to learn new skills during the off-season. And what we do is effectively becomes a contract for the students to commit to what new skills do they want to learn, what skills do they want to refine. We establish a timeline, and then we move towards that. And for me, this year I'm blessed that my robotics teams, I actually have a dedicated class time with them in addition to us working after school and on weekends. But on here, we actually come up with a set deadline of by the time the school year is over, these are the skills that you will have either acquired, or these are the skills that you will have refined. Okay, so during the regular season, kind of give you an example here of what this looks like. And I know there is no way you can read that up there. I will actually have a link to this presentation and to the template that we use for this. I did also talk with a student and make sure that he was okay with me using his actual growth plan from last year. This was the first one we ever had to do. But on here, I had actually already brought the team in. We had revisited the concept of gracious professionalism. And on here, I sat down with a student individually, and we read over this. And this was the first page of the plan, where it said simply, the growth plan is developed to allow you the opportunity to grow yourself personally and professionally in areas that your coach has observed you need some additional development in. And then at that point, I explained to him, it's not disciplinary, it's not punitive, I'm not picking on him. It's just that I felt that he needed a little bit more assistance with understanding what the expectations were. And that was when I wound up finding that, when I spoke with his parents, that some of the behavior I was running into was cultural. Some of the behavior was just family. But there was a pretty decent amount of it that I discovered wound up being cultural. So some of that we did not put into this growth plan, and other parts that was more things that needed to be addressed professionally. We did put into his plan. On the way we did the plan, and this I found has been the best way to address this. The growth plan has multiple assignments for the student to do, and what a lot of my kids like to do is they like to try to rush through these, like as in do them all on one day, which I don't let them, because I want them to reflect on what it is. And here in a minute, you're going to probably kind of be able to piece together what got the student onto this growth plan. There is a point of accountability on it, and they do actually sign it. I mean, they'll take ownership of that. This is what the expectation is of me. So like on this particular student, I had explained to him that much of his plan is based upon personal reflection, and that the expectation is that the plan will be completed by the assigned due date. I did have to put in that if he did not complete the plan, that he would be removed from the team. Now that one, that was between me and my principal, and on there I really didn't have a choice at that point. We had already spoken about what the expectations were for behavior 2 or 3 different times, So here, as I said, we were going a little bit deeper. But for example, his first assignment that he had, and these, I think I spaced them all 1 week apart. But his first assignment was, what exact behaviors do you believe that your coach has observed that have led to the creation of this growth plan? Be detailed and talk with your teammates about what they have observed. So he knew that several of his teammates had already come to me about his behavior. And I had already addressed with him what the expectations were. On here, I was asking him to reflect, why do you think you're here? He knew why he was there. He knew what he had done. He did talk with some of his other teammates just to make sure. He wanted to do that and then immediately move on to the second assignment, which I told him, no, you can't do that. You have to wait. The second week, his assignment was to write, which he had a fit over this. My kids hate to write. But he had to write 2 complete paragraphs answering the question of how can you fulfill the vision of gracious professionalism while working on this team? What changes will you implement to fulfill the vision of gracious professionalism? Which on there, I was actually proud of what he put. Unfortunately, I can't share it with you because he did mention several other students' names in there, and I was not about to go through all of those parents' phone calls of asking, can I please put your kid's name in here? That it was all handwritten, so it'd be a little hard to read. But on there, that was probably the part that took him the longest. But he did go through, because what he gave me in the end wound up being about 6 pages. As I said, at first he complained about 2 paragraphs. He's like, how many sentences per paragraph? At least 3. So he goes, 3 total per paragraph, so 6 sentences. So I was fully expecting to get 6 sentences. And then as I said, after 2 weeks, it was about a week, so yeah, it was February 10th, he turns in, it's a stack of papers. And it was well written. Because for him, what he did was he was explaining to me, he was answering the question, but then he was also backing it up with why was he doing it that way. And that had tied in with that first assignment, which was what had he done. And then the last one, this one was where I was letting him know that he basically needed to come up with a plan of how was he going to hold himself accountable. I didn't want to see him backslide from where he had been. He was one of my team captains. He was actually our lead team captain this year. And I just wanted to make sure that he didn't have, for lack of a better way to put it, a relapse. So he had to come up, and this one I let him only write 1 or 2 paragraphs, and his was only 1 paragraph. But he had on there that he was going to, for his action to hold himself accountable, he was going to have his mother hold him accountable. And for those who are familiar with the Hispanic culture, you don't anger a Hispanic mama. And that was his words. He goes, I'm going to pick my mom over my dad. And I'm like, okay, why? Because I know his mom. And he goes, because if I don't do this, she will beat me into next week. I won't wake up till my senior year of high school. And he's a sophomore when he's doing this. I'm like, okay, so got it. So yeah, he picked his mom. And then ironically, the other one he asked was if I would let him know just up front if I saw behavior that I thought was concerning. And I told him that's fine. And as I said, this year we've not had any of the issues that we had experienced last year. So I would consider that it was successful. Then he signed it. Then he got a copy. I got a copy. His principal got a copy. So everybody got a copy of this. And last year, I think total I had 3 students that I had to put onto one of these types of plans. We had this one. He was about halfway through. And then I wound up having a second student who I had to address. It was a completely different issue, but had to address some behavior with. And all of my students have been able to complete these tasks. I've not had to ever remove a student, which is good. I'm going to knock on wood and hope I never have to. It's been close, but never had to do it yet. Okay, during the off season, now as I said, those I started last year. Then I started to look at this for this year, and I've got one team that is, even though they're not here today, who in here competes here in Texas? Or am I the only one? Okay, you. Okay, does anybody know what UIL is? Okay, UIL is our extracurricular body here in Texas. They also have a robotics event that partners with FIRST. So one of my teams is actually still competing. They'll compete all the way until May 19th, I think is the state tournament. So for them, we're going to do a growth plan, but we're also still trying to do final work on our FTC robot to get it ready for state. So that team, we don't have a whole lot of these professional growth plans yet in place. My other team did not advance to the regional championship, so for them, they transitioned into off-season in January. It was at the last week of January. So for them, we actually do have these growth plans in place. What we do on here is I sit down with the student, and the first day we do this, I explain to them what the expectation is. That it's January, school year ends in May, we need to come up with something for you to do. And I tell them, and they understand this, that there is a set curriculum from the state of Texas where I'm supposed to cover specific points. And I tell them, we'll cover them, but I want you to get something out of this as well. And I give them basically a bunch of different ideas on the board, but I keep it very general. Some students will say that they want to refine their ability to work on a team. I've actually had a few students that came forward and said that they didn't feel like the team, or at least their section, their work group on the team ever really solidified. Okay, fair enough. I've had some that they come up, they say that they want to work on new skills. Like I may have an engineer who says they want to learn how to program. Or I get the other one where it's the programmer who wants to learn how to use a screwdriver, which is scary from time to time. But this is what these off-season growth plans are used for. The first time I went through it, I told them, okay, come up with what you want to learn and when you want to learn it, and I kind of turned them loose, and that was a horrible idea. It did not work well, because I got all sorts of weird stuff back from them. Like, I want to learn to program. Okay, we need something a little bit more specific. And I didn't give them any direction. I mean, at the beginning, and then I think a lot of them suddenly started trying to go learn stuff on their own, and we weren't ready for that yet. So we went through, and I had to introduce them to this concept. This is what we call SMART goals, and some of you know this, some of you don't. I had to explain this to my kids, that when you're writing the goal, it has to address all of these things. And this kind of burst their bubble for some of them, because they really wanted just a really big general goal, and then they could say, well, I got it. I'm like, well, no, I want very refined goals that I can actually hold you accountable to. That they didn't like. And I think that's just working with high school kids. They don't want to be held accountable for something exactly that they came up with. So on here, for those that don't know this, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over what each one of these things is, but the letters for a SMART goal, it's just simply an acronym. First one is that it has to be something that is specific. So in this particular case, I may have a student who their original goal was, I want to learn to program. A more specific goal would be, I want to learn how to program using the provided block level language. So it's more specific. I mean, if you're FTC, you know that you can use one of the block level languages, you can use Java, you can have a dozen different compilers from Java to get it over onto the phone. There's multiple different things. So just saying, I want to learn to program, it's a little bit vague. So I make them be a little bit more specific. Then we get to the M, which is going to be, it has to be measurable. So on this one, they may say that their original goal now is, I want to learn how to program using the provided block level language. Okay. What do you want to learn to do with it? Okay, for those that are FTC or FRC, you know that the robot is a whole bunch of different subsystems, is really what it comes down to. So on here, this may be, I want to learn how to program the motors or the drive motors using the block level language. It sounds very simple, but if the kid's never programmed before, that's that. I always love that. I jokingly say that I'm the one who nerds out, but when they suddenly, load the program, they pair the phone to the onboard phone, hit the controller, and the motors start moving. I mean, they get a big ear-to-ear grin. Now, usually the motor's running backwards, but or it's going in circles, but hey, it's moving, which is good. Okay, the A, this was the one that I actually usually have the hardest time with them. This one is attainable. They'll set a goal that's either like way too hard, like I want to master the entire the Java programming language today, but I don't know how to turn on a computer. Yeah, no, that's not happening, dear. Sorry. That is not attainable. Now that's a bit extreme. I did not have a child who gave me that. I do have kids though who they've never seen a text-based language before ever, and they want to jump straight into Java, and I'm like, ooh, no, dear, wave off. Okay, let's do block level logic first. So on here, this is the one that honestly is the hardest for them, is coming up with an attainable goal. The rest of them wasn't that hard. Okay, relevant. This one is just simply, this one's actually really not that hard. It just needs to be relevant to whatever we're doing. So on here, as I said, I want to master the Java application development, which actually this one I have had a little bit of an issue with, where some of my kids, they want to create, like I had one student last year, middle of robotics, he wanted to create, it was a dating application, like how to pick up a girlfriend, and I'm like, wow, you need to like meet a real girl. But that's what he wanted to do, and I kept explaining to him, I was like, well, we're working on programming the robot. But that was, what he wanted. I'm like, that's not relevant to what we're doing. You want to do that as a side project, great, but not in here. So that one, though, hasn't really been that big. And then the last one is just, is it time bound? So this is when, we actually set a date. On here, honestly, my students, they are accountable to somebody with these dates, with their whole goals. Just like you saw on the regular season growth plan. On here, they have to pick somebody who's going to hold them responsible to those dates. And I tell them on this one, it's not me. That's not my job. My job is that they have to develop the goal, and since for me this is a class as well, I do give them a grade that they submitted a goal, and it has to meet all of these requirements. It has to actually be a defined SMART goal. But I'm not the one who, there's no grade tied to did you hit your goal. That I don't do. But they do have to find somebody who's going to hold them accountable. Now that one is kind of funny. That one they usually don't go get mama to go be the one who's holding them accountable for that one. Sometimes they'll get a sibling, sometimes they'll get their dad, sometimes they'll get a brother, nephew, uncle, somebody. I've had a few that have gone to the assistant principals and asked them. And then my APs come up and ask me, I was like, what is this that they're doing? Like, yeah, okay, sorry, let me explain. But on here, I don't tie a grade to it. Because realistically, I mean, the date that's on there, that's for the student. That's for the kid. If they realize that they're getting close to that date and they need to change it, I tell them, change it. That's fine. I mean, it may take you longer to learn how to do that one task, or you may get it done early, you can move on to the next task. That's fine. Deadlines can be moved. So, as I said, on here with our goals are the off-season growth plan. It is multiple goals, okay, so they have to break it up. So, as I said, I've got one student right now, she really wants to learn programming. And that was her first goal, and I told her, okay, let's do this. Your first goal, let's focus on logical reasoning. So all we did was we went into Scratch, and I was having her work with block level programming. It wasn't even directly related to the robot. This was just, can you understand the idea of a loop? Can you understand the idea of a conditional statement? And she did. But that was her first goal, was just to understand those concepts. Then we moved into her next goal, which was to apply that knowledge to the robot. And as I said, we've moved on. She's actually now learning Python as her first language, which I know we can't use on the robot. But we tried Java, and that was like jumping into the deep end of the pool for her. So I was like, okay, let's try Python, which is what I teach in my first year computer science class, and she's getting that one. And then now we're getting ready to transition before end of school year. We'll move into Java. And then, just like I said earlier, there is accountability. They have to find somebody who's going to hold them accountable, and I do stress to them, it's not me. Now, it can be a classmate. I do let them do that. It can be one of the people who's on the team. And then I expect them to sign it. We make a copy of it. They keep the original. I get a copy. My director gets a copy of it. And my kids at first ask, was like, well, why does she get a copy? And I tell them, it's like, I want it to be, official. That's it. My director honestly probably never looks at the things. Actually, she does, because then she'll ask the kids on her own, how's the plan going? How's it going learning this? How is this working? Which I didn't ask her to do. But she did that on her own, which and it is nice. I've got that support from my director. Beyond that, that's it. That's my whole presentation. So it's like really, really short, which hopefully no one's going to horribly complain about. Does anybody have any questions?
You're saying this is a subject that you teach,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously teach as a program subjects as well.
Mm-hmm.
This experience, how do those students actually look at that class? So they are choose an elective, or is it?
For us, what we have, because we were a small rural district, for some of you this is going to make you cringe, we just launched STEM programs at our high school last year. Was our first year that we ever did anything that was even related to STEM. We also simultaneously launched STEM programs going all the way down to 3rd grade, so lower elementary. So we launched everything from 3rd through 12th all at once. For our 3rd graders as they rise up, we purchased it was a Smart Lab curriculum. I'm trying to remember the company, somebody out of Colorado, that gives us curriculum from 3rd through 8th. 9 through 12, I'm the one who wrote the curriculum, and the prerequisites that we put in place. So like for us, what we have is the students are required to, here in Texas, they're required to pick what we call a pathway. Closest equivalent would be like a college major. Now they can change what they're interested in. In fact, I tell my students a lot, if you go in and let's say you come into STEM, and that's the pathway that you've chosen, you go through that first year foundation course and you realize, I don't like any engineering fields. And I teach that freshman gateway course. We cover 17 different engineering disciplines in there very, very quickly. But we cover them all, so they can at least see what they all are. They may get through it and decide, I don't like engineering. Okay, fair enough. Change pathways. This is where you need to be learning what you want. I see kids that jump into criminal justice and they suddenly decide, I don't want to be a police officer. Okay, but then I have to break the news to them, you got to stay in the course till May. So you're in there to end of year. You can't change in September. You're 1 month into the school year, sorry, not happening. Sometimes we let them out at mid-year, but rarely. So for us, they'll enter the pathway. For my kids, they can either jump into that engineering principles class. So as I said, it's that overview course that I cover, or they can go into Computer Science 1, which for me, we teach that the first half of that course is programming logic, so I use Scratch, and the second half is Python. Then Computer Science 2 is Java. But to be in the robotics class, I do require they have to have completed one of those 2 courses. Now next year we're launching a club team as well, so which is, I'm going to be crazy and manage 3 teams next year along with the league. I had a lot of kids who wanted to be in robotics, but they did not have the prereqs. Remember I told you we launched this whole STEM initiative from 3rd through 12th. Well, that included my current 8th graders. Well, they're going to be my freshmen next year. We had an FTC team at the junior high, but I don't have a class to catch them as 9th graders. And I've spoken, and one of them happens to be my superintendent's son. So I'm like, okay, I really don't want this. I don't want any of those kids. I'm not doing it just solely because of my superintendent. But I don't want those kids to not have something to maintain that momentum and that interest that they got in their first FTC experience by having to wait a year because we put prereqs in place. But I also don't want to waive the prereq. I don't want a kid to jump into the robotics class and not have at least one of the required prereqs. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the cultural differences we see between the lectures we have in the US and Australia is the notion that this is an integrated part of your curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Is a few years ahead of where we are at the moment. A lot of us are still running these as lunchtime clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Activities, and to get schools to understand that these STEM
Well, and,
Watch what you're talking about there about developing this plan,
mhm.
this assessment to take home and say, look, here's the way to structure this for those children.
Oh, yeah. Well, but see, for us, we're still, and as I said, because at my high school, or within my school district, because that's just being in our second year with having anything that resembled a structured STEM program, some of my administrators still, like right now, in 7 hours, we do the equivalent of a very large open house. We will have every parent of every child in our school district at our high school, and we will all be crammed in like this, doing demonstrations of projects throughout the year. Well, my curriculum director, and she oversees, it's the core subjects. So for us, that's English, science, social studies, and then math. She had said, I want STEM and we have different assigned areas where we're going to do these presentations. And she said, I want STEM in the library. And I told her, I said, okay, first off, I mean, our library is maybe twice the size of this room. But I told her, I said, okay, STEM is a lot more than just the robotics, computer science, and my fundamental engineering course that I teach. We've also got what we call a concurrent enrollment engineering course where the kids, they're doing assignments for us at the high school with a high school teacher, but they're also doing assignments under the instruction of a university professor and earning credit for that freshman fundamentals engineering course at one of the UT system schools. But then I explained to her as well, this is also going to include things like food sciences. This is a lot of the things that she looked at is going, well, those are the career and tech ed electives. I'm like, okay, it does not include business. I'm sorry if you teach BIM, but it does not include business, but it includes a lot of other courses that go far beyond what we just traditionally looked at as STEM. And that's when she said, well, no, I just want robotics in there. No, that's not all STEM is. So, I mean, even for us, with having this, it's still sometimes a little bit of a battle of, no, STEM is more than that. Yeah, yeah. Well, see, and for my FTC team last year, we did not have a class. It was lunchtime and weekends, and that was it because we are so high poverty. Many of the families that we have within our district, they may have one car, and it's doubtful if it even works. So the kids have to be bussed in, which means they're on a fixed schedule. I can't start before school, and that means they're also on a fixed schedule going home, so I can't do anything after school. But they can usually get a cousin, an uncle, somebody to drive them up on a Saturday, or I'm driving around town picking these kids up. And us being a small rural district, I'm allowed to do that. I know some of you are horrified if you come from bigger districts going, oh, we can never do that. And when I worked in the Dallas metro area, no, I'd never been able to do it. And we would sometimes spend 8, 10, 12 hours on a Saturday. We'd get up there about 8 in the morning. We wouldn't leave till 8, 9 at night. And we'd be working on that robot, going through, multiple different iterations and everything else. And then fortunately we were able to apply for enough grants to get, a game floor, the parts that we needed. But that was how we launched last year. And I mean, we did not advance out of our league last year, but we did good for our first year. And then this year, just with the interest that it generated, I was able to go to my principal and say, okay, I would like a class now. In fact, I would like 2 classes because the second class can count as a math credit. That's the only way I got the second class because the state of Texas allows me to count second year robotics as a math credit. And I've got a whole lot of seniors that they need that 4th math credit to graduate, and they're like, yeah, this kid barely understands algebra. Like, yeah, okay, put him in my class. Like, they're doing they're doing math equations like right now. Yeah, actually it is right now. They've got another hour of class. So they're doing, it's different equations calculating if, a robot's on the surface of the moon. Okay, what's the distance? If I'm going to communicate through, a laser beam, as soon as I send the signal from here, the robot's driving at this speed on the surface of the moon. The tires are this diameter. I want it to stop. At how many seconds ahead of that time would I need to tell the robot to stop so it stops on this mark? So, I mean, there's a little bit of physics that are involved because they have to take into account gravity, the circumference of the wheel, all this other stuff. And they're probably looking at this assignment 30 minutes ago when they got into class and going, oh, he's making us do math again. But my second year kids know why I'm making them do the math, because they're getting a math credit out of it. My first year kids, they don't have as many problems, but they do have some of the same ones. So, that's, yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Um, okay, for us, are you here in Texas or are you outside Texas? Okay. Well, in Texas, the system, we're a mid-sized 4A school, but that, outside Texas, we are at the high school, so our high school's 4th grade, so 9 through 12. We are 715 students. Total district, we operate, our elementary is spread across 3 buildings. We've got, we start with kids at pre-K 3, because we are high poverty. We've got a lot of kids that qualify for 3-year-old pre-K.
Right.
So we've got one campus that's the 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and kinder. We've got one campus that's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Our intermediate is 4th and 5th. And then our junior high is 6, 7, and 8. And then high school is 9 and 12. So we're maybe, I want to say we're just under 2,900 students for the entire district.
And then the size of your teams?
My team,
Because we're like,
yeah.
you're like talking exactly about our size district.
This year, my team actually got a little bit bigger than where I wanted them to be because my counselors put way too many kids in my class because they could not understand the concept. What we did, since I do have robotics 1 and robotics 2,
Uh-huh.
the original plan had been to have one dedicated class period of robotics 1, one dedicated class period of robotics 2. They came back and said, well, the kids can't fit it all on their schedule, so we'll use stack them. So basically 2 classes meet at the same time. I said, well, that's nightmare from my side, but okay. So I agreed to it. The computer, unfortunately, when they were populating kids into classes, the computer looked and said, hey, Evans has 24 empty seats in robotics 1 that period, and another 24 empty seats for robotics 2 that period. My lab only seats 24 kids.
I see, okay.
But the computer didn't understand that, so that I walked in first day of school, and why do I have 39 children in this room?
Okay.
And I'm like, y'all have 7-4 till we figure something out. We were able to get some of them moved out, but our master schedule was so lean this year, we couldn't, there was no electives to put them into. And kids, I told them, we'll take PE again. We won't do that. So I was able to get most of mine down to 32. But 32 kids, and
That's a
that's
lot.
50C teams with 32 kids.
That's a lot.
That was a lot. That was a nightmare on a bus, because I'm transporting 2 teams with 30 plus kids, and then I'm transporting the junior high team as well. Now for us, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. You heard me talk about UIL earlier, so our extracurricular entity. At the beginning of the season, and I put it to majority vote for the kids, because we don't find out if we advance to UIL until, it was just 2 weeks ago, was when we got our invitations, if we were invited. The thing is when you're invited, then you have to acknowledge, did you follow all UIL rules? Which UIL rules and FTC rules aren't exactly the same. FTC doesn't have a limit on how many hours you can work. UIL does. UIL says, no, I think it's 8 hours outside of regular instructional time can be used. Remember, we were averaging 10 and 12-hour days. So we would exceed the 8-hour rule really quickly. I didn't put a vote to the kids. I simply asked them, okay, how many of you want to follow UIL rules? And I explained to them, if we follow UIL rules the whole season, and we get an invite, then that means I can accept the invite. additional questions, feel free to email me. And then if you want me to send you the templates that